The number one question that people always ask me is easily, Rahul, how can I improve my vertical? Now, while I love answering this question over messages, it's such an in-depth question, so I thought I would do a video on it. Now, I have covered this in the past in previous videos. I've given a lot of advice and tips on how you can improve your vertical, but I thought this time I'd do things a little bit different and kind of go more in depth, take a deeper look into it, and kind of give advice depending on what stage you are, just because I think that can be more specific to you and it will just help you a lot more. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm also going to try and give a little bit of context to how I improve my vertical and how I started out. Not going to go too much into it because I have done a video on that before, which I will link in the description, but I am going to kind of give my opinion and my experience on what I did to improve my vertical and how I went from a 25-inch vertical roughly to a 40-inch vertical and dunking at only 5'7". So without further ado, let's get into it. The number one tip I would give, and this was to anyone but especially beginners, is to just practice jumping and just get better at the technique of it. Now, the reason for this is one, it builds that foundation. So if you have a weak technique, then you're not going to get the most out of your jump, no matter how much strength training you do, no matter how much plyometrics you do. If your technique is weak, that's really going to hinder your progress, and obviously your body's only going to be strong, or your jump is only going to be as good as its weakest link. So getting that foundation down, just practicing technique is the biggest thing. Another reason why that's so important is because that is a form of plyometrics as well. So just jumping, it's obviously going to work on those fast twitch fibers. So you're hitting so many different things at once. You're working on technique, you're working on that muscle memory, and you're working on those fast twitch fibers and getting more explosive slowly. So that's the number one tip I'd give. Alongside that, I would also study pro jumpers and dunkers, dissect their technique and try to apply it to your own. That's one thing I really did. I always videotaped my technique, broke it down and compared it to professional technique, and that's something I still do to this day, which has helped me improve my vertical drastically, because you don't actually realize the mistakes you're making unless you look back on your technique. Maybe if you're looking at it in slow-mo, you can dissect some things, break down some things, and you can realize what it is you're actually doing wrong. So that's a huge tip, a huge piece of advice I'd give, especially if you're a beginner. Now, when you're at the beginner stage, this is something I did when I started training around 14 or 15, is I didn't actually start going in the weight room or anything like that. I just did strictly jumping. I had a low rim and I just tried to dunk on a higher height each time, and progressively tried to touch higher objects, and that's where I kind of built that foundation that I had. Now, the reason I'd recommend this and not to get in the weight room straight away, especially if you're at that age around 14, 15 and you're a beginner, is because usually you can get some really good newbie gains just off doing that. I think in the first month of me just jumping a lot, I probably gained 5 to 6 inches on my vertical, and I'm a firm believer of not just working hard but working smart. So if you can get a lot of inches on your vertical just by doing a minimum or a certain amount of work, I don't think it's smart to do a whole extra workload when you just don't need to at the moment, because there will come a time where you do stall and you can't increase your vertical just off doing jumping. That's when you can start to implement weight training and get onto a proper program that incorporates strength training and explosiveness and all those good stuff. But in my opinion, I think as you start out, just to focus on jumping as the main thing, because that will help you set that foundation. Now, once you've passed that beginner stage and you've kind of entered into that intermediate advanced stage where you're not experiencing gains as quickly, maybe you've been training for 6 months to a year, that's when I would recommend getting into the weight room. Obviously, if you're around the age of 15, 16, you're new to the weight room, I would recommend, starting slow, starting light, work on the form, get someone to coach you, make sure you're doing the technique right, because that's very important when you're just starting out in the weight room, and make sure that you're on a program that's specific to improving your vertical. Now, like I said in my previous point, I personally wouldn't get in the weight room straight away, but if you're getting into the weight training now and you're not seeing gains just from jumping, or you're not seeing as much gains, this is where it's really vital that you're on a program that is specific to what you want to improve, which is your vertical jump. So you want to make sure that one, this program incorporates the main strength compound movements. So we're talking squats, we're talking deadlifts, and then a lot of those accessory exercises that are also compound movements, barbell hip thrusts, lunges, front squats. Those are some of the main movements that I've incorporated into my routine over the years to get me to the vertical that I have now. Now, the other main tip I would give is plyometrics, because the mistake I often see is people focus a lot on their strength training aspect, but then when it comes to jumping, they don't have a high vertical because they fail to use that strength quickly. So that's what plyometrics does. It helps you to use that strength in an explosive context, and it helps you to contract those fast twitch fibers in a short amount of time. So if you just have the strength, it's not going to help you get your best vertical alone, because strength, although it's a prerequisite for having a high vertical, you need to train yourself, you train your body to jump high and use that strength in an explosive context, and that's exactly what plyometrics does. So exercises like broad jumps, squat jumps, box jumps, sprints, seated box jumps, weighted squat jumps, all those sorts of exercises, some of the ones that I've incorporated and seen a great result from. And you'll see that when you combine the strength training and the plyometric training aspect, that's when you start to really gain power and when you see that increase in your vertical. Now, another tip I would give, and this one is really crucial, is to really focus and improve on your core strength. Now, obviously this gets targeted through your compound lifts, your squats and your deadlifts, but I like to do a little bit extra focus on really improving that core, and sometimes even do core exercises that mimic movements that I do when jumping, and I think that really has helped me to keep that core tight and engage it when I am, you know, going for dunks and things like that. So that's another huge thing. Don't overlook training your core. That really helps with that transfer of energy as well, and like I said, if you have a weak core, then you're really bleeding energy when you go to increase that vertical. Another tip I would give is to make sure you're progressive overloading in your training. What that means is you're slowly, gradually increasing the demand you put on your body. So if you're always going to train at the same intensity, lift the same weight, do the same volume, even do the same style of training, your body is eventually going to be accustomed to that, and you're not going to be able to improve and progress. So it's really important that over a slow period of time, you do increase the intensity, the volume of your training. And that's something I did recently in the months leading up to me getting my first dunk. I really increased the volume to a standard which I hadn't even done before, and that really forced my body to grow and adapt to that additional volume, and that really helped me to, you know, get stronger, get more explosive. You know, I was in the weight room more frequently, and when I was in the weight room, I was also going more intensely with my exercises as well, doing heavier weight. Obviously, I was training specific to being in an explosive phase, so I wasn't going too heavy all the time, but no matter what I did, I made sure I did it with higher intensity each time, whether that was lifting light weights explosively or lifting heavy weights. So another tip is to really progressive overload, otherwise you're just going to stay at the same spot. Now, the last tip I'd give is something more towards advanced athletes. This is for people who maybe have stalled and they really cannot gain much on their vertical. They may be only increasing their vertical by a couple inches a year. And that would be to change your style of training up. So for example, if you've always been doing the same split, same exercises, maybe you can try out doing a completely different routine. For example, if you haven't tried contrast training or complex training, or if you haven't tried a push-pull legs, something like that. If you haven't tried a specific split or routine, to do that, because that way your body again can adjust to a new stimulus that you've been giving it, rather than just keep going off the old one that it doesn't really, you know, take anything from anymore. So that's a huge thing. That's something that's helped me overcome my plateaus, just switch up my training and my splits that I do. So that's it for this video. Hopefully you guys enjoyed. Just to summarize some of the main tips I gave. One, practice jumping. That's the biggest, most vital thing you can do to build that foundation, to work on those fast twitch fibers, and, you know, the more you build technique, the more it's going to help you with that that vertical and that explosiveness. The second thing is obviously strength training and plyometrics. Those two go hand in hand. You can't have one without the other. If you do strength training without the plyos, you might be really strong, but you won't be very explosive. And if you just do plyos, then you won't have much strength to convert into a vertical jump, so you won't have much power. Improving your core as well, that's a key component. Progressive overloading in your training, make sure that you're always increasing the stress on your body slowly and gradually, and then obviously changing your style of training up every now and then to make sure your body keeps adjusting to a new stimulus. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, make sure to give it a huge thumbs up, subscribe if you're new, comment down below if you have any more questions. Feel free to message me on Instagram and I will hopefully answer your questions. It's been a while since I've done a vertical jump tips video, so hopefully this helps, and I will see you guys in the next one. Peace.
Cause it's a greatness is within. The hunger, drive, passion, and desire for the win. Cause it's a greatness is within. This is how I'm living from beginning to the end.